Welcome to the Cambridge Creative Writing Centre series of conversations with writers. Today I'm in conversation with the writer Camilla Balshaw. I met Camilla when she was a creative writing student with the University of Cambridge Institute of Continuing Education's undergraduate diploma in creative writing. Since then, she's gone on to study an MA in creative writing at Goldsmiths, University of London. She's written for publications such as Guardian Weekend and The Observer magazine. Camilla writes short fiction, flash fiction and life writing, and was recently shortlisted for the Penguin WriteNow prize, which aims to find, mentor and publish new writers from communities underrepresented on the nation's bookshelves. She's working on her first novel set in the wilds of Norfolk, and she's also a yoga teacher. So hello, Camilla, it's really nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Midge. Hello.
So it's been a while, hasn't it?
It has.
And I was thinking back to the assignment you did for the non-fiction term, and I remember it really, really vividly, which I think is a sign of good writing. And I actually went back and looked at it, and I had it in my head that it was about you and you reconnecting with your dad, but also with your wider family and your cousin. And I had a very vivid impression of you being in a cafe in King's Cross. And I had it in my head that it was pret-a-manger, and I was really shocked to find that it wasn't. But again, I think that's a sign of a good writer, because you'd allowed me to put in those extra details myself. So it was great that it stayed with me all that time.
Great. Well, that was a real catalyst, actually, writing about my father for that assignment. It really changed my life. I mean, if I can just backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
So I went to Jamaica for the first time in 2016.
Right.
To reconnect with my mother's family.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't that many left actually when we went to Jamaica, but it was just an opportunity for me really to see where she was from and reconnect with my Jamaican heritage. I'd never been. I went at the grand old age of 46.
Wow.
And it was amazing. And from that first trip in 2016, it really lit a flame, and I felt I had to write. So it was that first trip to Jamaica. And then after that, I got this message from a cousin, yes, that my dad wanted to communicate with me. And I went to Nigeria for the first time in 2017. Gosh. So they were huge catalysts for me, going to one Nigeria where my dad was born, and then to Jamaica where my mother was born. And it really just changed my life in terms of my writing. And I found since then I really want to explore those cultures in my writing.
Yeah. So what kind of writing had you been doing before that? And have you always been a writer, do you think? Or was it something that really kind of turned into writing?
I think I always wanted to write, Midge, if I'm honest. I loved reading. English was my favourite subject at school, as was drama. And I always loved writing stories at school, spelling tests. You know, I loved English, but I couldn't imagine myself as a writer. It wasn't in my vocabulary.
Right.
And so I started writing. My first published piece of writing was when I lived in Tokyo. I lived in Tokyo in my 20s. Right. And I got involved with an academic out there who started a magazine called Blacks in Asia. And he was an amazing man, and he really opened my reading life up, reading life as well. So I got some things published in that, but I never thought of myself as a writer. I just wrote a few articles about health, about music, a little bit about literature. I was teaching English at the time in Japan, and then I came back and trained to be a drama teacher when I came back to England. So writing was something I just never thought. I just never thought of it as a career. I mean, or something I could seriously do. Does that make sense? It just seems so far removed.
But why? Because you're obviously a talented writer. Did it seem like a kind of presumptuous thing to say I'm a writer, or what do you think was holding you back?
Yeah, I think that, and also I don't know. I mean, there's so many. I think I always knew I was creative. Because obviously I'd done a lot of theatre, or I did singing, I did some writing, but I felt that was kind of the writing career was just out of my league. And I didn't feel. And I was saying, I remember having a conversation with a friend, and I was thinking, well, what could I write about? Do I write about, who wants to read about my experiences?
Right.
As a Black woman as well. And yeah, I just didn't. And I remember thinking about this, thinking, well, would I have to write as a white person? Would my characters have to be white?
Yes.
You know, but really just, it just seems so far removed to write from my experience in my 30s. It just,
So what changed that? Was it going to Jamaica?
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to Jamaica, and then I came back. I live in Norfolk, in a very sort of rural market town.
Yeah.
And I just happened to see in the newspaper they were offering a 10-week free Arts Council funded life writing course. Uh-huh. So I started that, had an amazing tutor who was really supportive of my writing, and got some things published from that. And then thought, I think I can do this, and I think I want to pursue it. And then I started the course with you, diploma. And again, that just opened my life. It just opened my confidence in terms of, I think I can maybe do this. I'll give it a go, see where it goes. And and I haven't looked back since. So I think it's confidence. It's confidence in my abilities, and also feeling that I had something to say.
Yeah. So that first life writing course you did, were you writing about Jamaica and your mother's family, or was it something else?
It was kind of a mixture. I was writing about my mum and my dad. I was also writing about the experiences of living in a rural area. And so I wrote a lot about identity and where we place ourselves, and that idea that if you're from a Black ethnic minority community, that you tend to live in urban areas. And I was asking questions about why that was. So I was exploring things like that in my writing, my heritage.
So why do you think that we do think that people from that kind of background have to live in urban areas? Is it just what we see on television or read in books? Or?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Midge. I think so. And I think also, I remember having a conversation at a party with someone from India. Heritage was Indian, and they were saying, Camilla, what's it like? I just couldn't be the only brown in the village. What's it like living out of London? And I think sometimes people, the Black community, Asian community, we sometimes put barriers in terms of where we see ourselves, and we think that the countryside isn't for us, or will stand out, people will stare, will be too different. And of course I do stand out because there aren't that many Black people in Norfolk, but I think sometimes you just have to be pioneers, and you have to kind of step out of what people expect of you. And I'm now that where I live is really informing my writing. Living rurally is really informing my.
That's interesting. In what way?
Well, I mean, my book is set in Norfolk, my fiction book that I'm writing. And I really wanted to explore this character who lives in a rural area of the UK. And and it just felt really normal for me to have this character not in London, to have her in a very different setting. And what that means in terms of her experiences.
I think that's fascinating. I would love to read that. Because I can't think of anything that's been similar to it. And I would love to read about that experience. I mean, I'm watching, what is it called? I May Destroy You on TV at the moment, which I think is fantastic. I just love it. But again, it's very urban, isn't it?
It is, and most things tend to be. I mean, I was, and that's fine, that's great. But it's very rare, I think, that there's, especially a Black female character, and the setting not being in either London or a major city. So, and it's interesting because I'm reading a lot at the moment about people moving out of London because they don't need to live in London anymore because work's changed so much.
Yeah.
And again, people are focusing on the countryside, but it's very rare that you see a black person just talked about moving out of London. It tends to be a sort of traditional white family, 2 kids, blonde hair, you know. So, so I wanted to write about that in this book.
Yeah. And I was also, when I was looking back at your creative assignment, I looked at the critical commentary that you did. Do you remember we asked you to write about the choices you made in your creative? And you were talking about writers like Aida Edemariam, who writes for The Guardian, and who wrote the Wife's Tale about her grandmother in Ethiopia. And I don't think it would have come out by the time you heard her. I think you talk about listening to her at the British Library. So what kind of difference does it make for someone like that to be published and to win awards and to have a kind of higher profile?
Well, it's fantastic, and I mean, I've got her book, and it's an amazing book, beautiful, and I think the memoir at the moment. There's a lot of non-fiction books that really explore identity and heritage, and I think it's a really important conversation that we're having around where we belong. And just recently, I've read "The Terrible" by Yasa Daly Ward, which is fantastic. It's sort of a book about searching for who she is. She has a Jamaican mother, a Nigerian dad. I think there's another book that's just come out. I can't remember the author's name, but again, it's about this whole idea of where we place ourselves and identity and heritage. And they're themes, they're really common themes for second generation, you know, immigrants, about where we belong and where we sit. And I'm constantly drawn to that narrative, you know, of kind of wanting to read readers who are really trying to understand who they are.
Yeah.
And because that was my journey.
Yes, and you said the Wife's Tale was beautifully written, and one of the reasons I was drawn to it was the fact that it's quite difficult to pigeonhole, and her grandmother would have been someone who would have been completely wiped out of history because she didn't write anything down. So a lot of it is oral history and kind of reshaping her story. And for me, that's really important, that we kind of try and reclaim some of those stories that would have been lost otherwise.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm finding that just talking to my mum about her experiences of coming to the UK, and my Nigerian family about their experiences coming over in the 50s, which were very different from my mum's because they were from quite a wealthy Nigerian family. My mum was much more working class Jamaican family. Yeah. So you've got these two very opposing experiences. And again, a lot of that, especially for my mum, is just from memory, and it's wonderful because it's so evocative of the time. And I want to do that justice when it comes to my non-fiction project, to really do that justice and give her voice some urgency, especially around what happened with the Windrush generation, with the whole scandal. So yeah, it's so important. It's so important. And when this fiction beast that I'm writing eventually is finished and I can focus on the non-fiction, it's something that I'm really looking for. I love going back to, I don't know, I'm always drawn to my father and my mother and their experiences in my writing. So
with your parents, is there a kind of angle there, or are you just going to see what their story is and see how you might tell it?
Yeah, I'm kind of weaving it into it's sort of a quest really, because obviously I had no relationship with my dad for a very long time. So it talks about, I juxtaposed finding my father with also living in Tokyo, and having a very strange other career as a singer. Well, that's a long story, Midge. So it's a kind of story about a quest for my father, but it's also interspersed with music and culture and heritage.
Yes. And when you went back to Jamaica, I mean, how did it make? Well, not back because it was the first time you went, wasn't it? Did it kind of? I mean, how did you feel? And did it suddenly make sense of things in your past, or did it change the way you viewed yourself?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really difficult to articulate, Midge. I think I just had this huge urge to write and to really access that part of me that I think I'd just sort of I'd forgotten about. I'd pushed it away. And so going to Jamaica, and then coming back and finding out there was a free 10-week course, kind of, it just felt like this was the path I had to take.
Yeah.
And then I did a couple of courses at City Lit. So I don't know, would I be writing now if I hadn't have gone to Jamaica? I asked myself that question, you know.
Well, it's funny, you've talked about going to places. I mean, are places important to you? Do they kind of ignite your creativity in some kind of way?
I think they do. I think they do. I'm always drawn to stories that have a real strong sense of place and setting. So yes, I think so. And I think where we're from is so fundamental to who we are and where we find ourselves. And at the moment I find myself in Norfolk, who knows how long for. But it certainly is going to really inform a lot of my writing, because it's sort of very precious, that place that you mark as home.
Yeah.
So we'll see kind of how that takes me and where that takes me. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking about your question as well about not seeing myself in literature, and I was just thinking this morning when I woke up about a book that really changed me, and it was, I read it when I was in Japan actually. It's by an author called Richard Wright, Native Son. And I don't know, it was one of those books that really ignited in me the power of literature and the power of this person's experiences. Were just so incredible to read, this character, Bigger Thomas. And but again, even reading that, I still couldn't imagine myself writing, well, I obviously couldn't write Richard Wright, but just a black character. I mean, and obviously now things are changing, aren't they?
We've mentioned Sarah Collins, for example, and her wonderful novel.
Absolutely. So and she did the course with you, didn't she?
The masters, and the Confessions of Franny Langton kind of came out of that, which is a fantastic book. So kind of, I mean, beautifully written and so wonderfully gothic, and just a great tale. Yeah,
amazing. And we need more of that, don't we? We need more stories, you know, just to kind of place ourselves within literature. It's so important. Our stories need to be told. I've actually got that book. My mum's reading it at the moment, Franny Langton, so I shall I shall borrow it once she's finished with it, but she's loving it.
And so how has lockdown been for you, and being kind of confined to Norfolk? Have you found it difficult to write in that?
I did initially. I did initially in the lockdown. I felt very displaced. I think everyone did, didn't they? And I found it very hard to concentrate.
Yes, yeah.
And then after a kind of 2 or 3 weeks into it, I really enjoyed, enjoyed probably is the wrong word to use, I appreciated the silence. It seemed, the world just felt like it was taking a pause. And it also gave me a chance to pause a little bit, because we all, in our lives, we're busy, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I think the lockdown really forced us to sort of step back. But it's been okay. Now I'm back in a writing rhythm, back into a routine, which is great.
When do you write? What's your writing routine then? I find it fascinating about other writers.
Well, I try to write in the morning. I'm very disciplined about that. I try to write from about 8 o'clock till 10, 2 hours, have a bit of a break, and then do another 2 hours. So that's kind of 4 hours a day. And then I do other things. I'm quite religious about that. I have to.
And do you set yourself a word goal for each day?
I tried that at the beginning and found I was putting too much pressure on myself. So now I'm a lot just more free and easy with what comes. But as long as I've done those set 2 hours in the morning, another 2 hours, I'm happy. And, you know, and if I get 1,000 words or 500, that's fine.
Yeah.
But just the fact that I've stuck to my routine is really important. That routine of everydayness, of keep going, is really important.
And I know you're a yoga teacher. Does that help with your writing?
It really does. I think one for discipline.
Yeah.
And routine, and also it's not the best thing on the body, is it, sitting on your backside for long periods of time. It's pretty horrendous. So to know that I can leave my writing desk and go and do some yoga and just stretch my shoulders and feel like a human body again and not kind of hunched over a computer screen, is pretty wonderful, actually. It is hard on the body.
Yes, no, it's awful. I'm conscious of how I'm sitting now because you're sitting. But what about the creativity aspect of it? Does it kind of yoga release things in your brain? Do things go on, you know, when you're in a kind of meditative state? Does it help with stories and things like that, do you think?
Not really. I think the thing that really helps is walking.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Yeah. It's
walking. I think when I'm practicing yoga, I'm totally in the moment of the practice. But when I'm out walking, especially around here, we've got some amazing forests, and we've obviously got a beach, and ideas just every other minute. I have an idea for a character, or a voice will come, or an idea will just come into my head. I find walking really therapeutic.
So do you think that would happen if you were in a city? Would you get that same kind of response?
I don't know actually. Possibly, because there is something, I think I mentioned, there is something about just that freedom of movement, and but I think I still would, because I just think when you're walking, there's a different energy to your brain, there's a different energy in your thought process. So I think you can get that anywhere, actually.
And you also write short fiction as well. So how does that work? Do you kind of get an idea and you think that would make a great short story, or do you think, oh, I feel like writing a short story now, what kind of ideas could I plunder, or what's the process like?
Well, short story writing is a new endeavour for me. I've only been writing short fiction for about a year and a half. I mean, I find writing short fiction really difficult. I find writing difficult, full stop. But writing short fiction is, it's
hard.
Yeah, well, you have to be so succinct, and you have to really. It's a big learning curve for me, writing short fiction. But I'm having a go and playing around with the form, and generally ideas come. Something I've read in a newspaper, or just an idea I've had, or someone I've met who stayed with me, themes I wanted to explore, I had one idea for a short story just because I saw someone on the tube wearing a pregnancy badge, and that sparked an idea for a short story. So I'm struggling with the short story form, just because you have to be so. With a novel, I'm finding you've got a longer length of time to explore what you want to say. In a short story, you've got a very limited time. And that's difficult. Really.
And are you in a writing group or anything like that? Do you share your writing with anyone?
Yeah, I have a mini writing group from my masters, which is great. So we meet over lockdown. We were meeting really regularly, kind of every Sunday. And then I have a friend in Norfolk who's a writer, so we share work as well. I think that's important, isn't it? Just to have that other eye and people who support you. It's really important to find a writers group that you feel connected with.
Yes.
And our group's quite small. There's only 4 of us. So yeah, I do have a writers group, and my husband also is a fantastic other, even though he doesn't write. It's just a fantastic person to kind of give writing to and find opinion from.
So the other people in the writing group, are they writing similar kinds of work, or are you all different in the forms that you're writing in?
We're different. Two are memoir,
Right.
and then the other person is fiction.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite nice, that we're a mixed group in terms of form, and different ages, which I think is great. Yeah, and I just think it's really useful at this stage, or I think I'll always probably be part of a writers group, but to have that support network and to have that group that you just trust, and who'll give you feedback and it not be, to be constructive, you know.
Yeah, it's very difficult giving feedback, isn't it? Because it can be absolutely crushing.
Absolutely can. It really can. And it's great. And I'm also working with a mentor at the moment as well, who's a debut author, Louise Hare,
right?
Who's mentoring me for a couple of sessions for my fiction, which is fantastic as well.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that. So yeah.
And what about reading? How do you kind of keep up to date with what's useful for you to read? I mean, I was really grateful when you did the diploma that you kind of said to me, you need to refresh your reading lists, and you're absolutely right, and we're doing that constantly. And you gave me some really good suggestions. But how do you do that? How do you kind of clue into, you know, who are the good new writers at the moment?
Well, I'm lucky enough to be part of a really fantastic book club called Rewriting the Canon, which was started by Charmaine Lovegrove, Dialogue Books, and she's also an editor at Hachette. And we still meet, so that's just fantastic for talking about new authors, talking about particularly Black writers. But yeah, I mean, like everyone, I read the Guardian review, I read the Times review on new books that are coming out. So I try to keep up to date. I try to read across genre, commercial fiction, literary, memoir. You know, I just love reading, so that kind of helps. It's quite difficult to read, I think, when I'm writing, like for writing this project I'm working on at the moment, I'm trying not to read so much because I find it influences.
Yeah. You hang on to your own voice, don't you?
I do. So, but I did sneakily read Britt Bennett's The Vanishing Half.
Right. Oh, yeah. My friend was talking about that and saying how interesting it was. Yeah.
It's really interesting. And I've just finished Kylie Reid, Such a Fun Place as well. I just couldn't help myself. I just thought, just read them, Camilla. Yeah. So I did.
Well, I think sometimes you kind of need nourishment, don't you? And so, you know, I completely agree with what you're saying, but I think you do need to keep reading, don't you? And sometimes it can be helpful to read in a different genre from the one in which you're writing. That can do the trick. But no, sometimes you just need to indulge yourself, I think.
You really do, don't you? You just can't beat a book at 10 o'clock at night, you know? It's just perfect. So, although I tried not to, I couldn't help myself. Yeah. But they're great books. I really recommend The Vanishing Half.
And do you go to when we're allowed to, the cinema much? Do you watch TV as well? Is that an influence on you?
I'd say the biggest influence on my writing is actually probably theatre.
Right.
Because I watch a lot of theatre. And because I used to do some acting, I love character-driven narratives, and I just find theatre really, and film actually, really useful for story and structure, and theatre really helps me with my dialogue. You know, it's fantastic for dialogue, and also, I mean, I find it, I'm not a very descriptive writer. That's something I'm really trying to work on.
Yeah.
It's funny, I was listening to a podcast by Kit DeWall, and she sort of said the same thing, that she could just write dialogue all day. And I was saying, I find dialogue quite easy, but I have an ear for dialogue. But for description, I'm really trying to work on that a lot more.
Yeah, because again, going back to your creative piece, which I reread, you were using your senses quite a lot, which I thought was very effective in description and in describing your father as well. Is that a technique you still use?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I'm really trying to use the senses to really get way more feeling and emotion into my writing, and to just, I think working with the senses really helps. And I'm just trying more and more just to give that little bit of texture and feeling and tone to my writing. And that's why, you do have to keep reading, don't you, other writers, and just keep learning.
Well, and also I think it's quite helpful to read something you hate, because you think, I don't want to do that, and that hasn't worked, because, I think it makes you more critical of your own writing in a good way.
Yes, I think you're right, actually. You're right. But I mean, the wonderful thing about having writing in my life, that it feels that I'm only going to hopefully improve, and get better.
Yeah.
There's no end game, is there? It's a constant evolving.
Yeah. And that's why I think I really enjoy editing, because you've got something and you can only make it better. So I think editing can be really creative in itself.
Yes, and I think do you have that moment as well of letting go of your writing when you say, this is it, I can't make this piece of work any better?
Yes.
Or do you hand a piece of work and they think, this is it, it needs work, but there you go?
Well, I think I do as well as I can, and then I let it go. But it's amazing how just sleeping on something or coming back to something in a week's time just allows you to see it in a different perspective. And I remember hearing, who was it? Someone reading from a published book, and someone said, so when do you stop editing? And she said, I was editing as I was going along, if from a published book, because even if something's published, you can still take words out, you can see repetitions. So it kind of never ends, does it really?
No. That's the beauty of it. In many ways, isn't it? It's, it's a real gift.
And I love looking at, a really accomplished writer and drafts of their work, and seeing how they've just torn it to pieces, really. And you think, well, if someone like that can take that approach, then we can all learn from it.
Absolutely. Well, I think I read somewhere that Michaela Cole for I May Destroy You wrote 192 drafts.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
I mean,
wow. Yeah,
just
incredible.
Unbelievable.
So and I think that just shows a kind of dedication to hard work as much as everything else, and kind of being a perfectionist. And it's so slick, isn't it? And so kind of authentic. I think it kind of takes hard work to be authentic, doesn't it, really?
Absolutely. And I think also what's great about her work is just that rawness, and that because I think just to go back to watching that, I was just blown away by seeing a Black female character in her 30s on our screen, and obviously the trauma this girl was going through, and how she managed to pull off trauma with humour and lightness, and then darkness, and it was just incredibly clever.
Yes, I mean, I haven't watched all of it yet, but I love the fact that I'm not quite sure what it is or where it's going, and it seems to change directions so often, so you can't actually relax for a minute.
No.
Because it'll dart off in a different direction, which is amazing.
And I think I read somewhere that also she's thinking about writing fiction next, so I think we need to be prepared for Michaela Cole's fiction debut. I think it would be amazing.
I think she could do anything, really.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I really do. We're very lucky to have her.
When is your novel going to be finished then?
Oh, that's a good question, Midge. I don't know. I'm still editing at the moment, and just getting lots of feedback from my mentor and my writing group. So I'm hoping to send out to beta readers soon.
Right.
Just like soon, without being an actual.
That's good enough.
Yeah, it will be sometime this year.
Yes.
So we'll see how that goes, and then hopefully going to start on the memoir. Pretty soon, hopefully.
Remember you promised you'd come back and do a reading at Madingley Hall.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to, if you're happy. I'd love to do that. That'd be amazing. Yeah. So it all started. So I'd love to come back and see you all.
Fantastic. Great. Well, it's been really nice chatting to you. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. We hope you can join us again for the next one. You'll find more information about the books we've mentioned and the courses we run in the description box below.